The greatest Bitcoin explanation of all time in under 10 minutes. We're reacting to Altcoin Daily today. Let's get into the video.
What is Bitcoin? What does Bitcoin do? Is it perfect? Neither was email when it was invented in 1972.
Facts.
This is the greatest Bitcoin explanation of all time. If you have a family member that doesn't quite understand cryptocurrency, send him or her this. They will thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Peter Van Valkenburg, and I'm the Director of Research at Coin Center, an independent nonprofit focused on the public policy issues affecting cryptocurrency and public blockchain networks. What is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is the world's first cryptocurrency, and it works because of the world's first...
And some of you may be sitting there like, why are we reacting to this right now? The reason we're reacting to this is because you need to know and understand Bitcoin, read the Bitcoin white paper before you can even get into crypto as a whole. Understand why you're investing in this asset class.
Public blockchain network. What does Bitcoin do? It's simple. It lets you send and receive value to and from anyone in the world using nothing more than a computer and an internet connection.
And a few clicks.
Now, why is it revolutionary? Because unlike every other tool for sending money over the internet, it works without the need to trust a middleman.
No banks.
The lack of any corporation in between means that Bitcoin is the world's first public digital payments infrastructure.
So to give you guys some context, in the regular traditional finance banking system, right, they have these ledgers that record all your deposits, withdrawals, e-transfers, so on. This is pretty much that, but it's open source, meaning anyone can use the technology, anyone can see the ledger, so we can all verify that these transactions are legitimate.
Sure. And by public, I simply mean available to all and not owned by any single entity. Now, we have public infrastructure for information, for websites, for email. It's called the internet. But the only public payments infrastructure that we have is cash, as in paper money. And it only works in face-to-face transactions. Before Bitcoin, if you wanted to pay someone remotely over the phone or the internet, then you could not use public infrastructure. You would rely on a private bank to open their books and add a ledger entry that debits you and credits the person you're paying. And if you both don't use the same bank, well, then there'll be multiple banks and multiple ledger entries in between.
Like trying to get something across the earth, like through money transfer, money is crazy. Even with a wire, look how much money you spend just to send like a couple $1,000 wire. Don't spend fractions of a penny. Like it's absolutely crazy to me.
With Bitcoin, the ledger is the public blockchain, and anyone can add an entry to that ledger, transferring their Bitcoins to someone else. And anyone, regardless of their nationality, race, religion, gender, sex, or creditworthiness, can for absolutely no cost create a Bitcoin address in order to receive payments digitally. Bitcoin is the world's first globally accessible public money. Is it perfect? No. Neither was email when it was invented in 1972. Bitcoin's not the best money on every margin. It's not yet accepted everywhere. It's not used often to quote prices, and it's not always a stable store of value.
Which will happen.
But it is working, and the mere fact that it works without trusted intermediaries
all that will happen
amazing.
Eventually.
It's a computer science breakthrough, and it will be as significant for freedom, prosperity, and human flourishing as the birth of the internet.
This is one thing that people haven't taken in yet. Now, he's going to explain how it's similar to the internet in certain ways, but what the internet did for information, do for finance. Think about how the traditional finance systems are set up at the moment. Like, you can't just go invest in the Shanghai Stock Exchange or go over to UK and invest in the Brexit. Everything is so segregated. This is the first global asset class where someone in literally Thailand, Venezuela, Kenya can invest in the exact same asset as me with just a single click of a few buttons. It's amazing.
And Bitcoin is just the beginning.
If
we can replace private payments infrastructure, then we can replace other private choke points to human interaction as well. Now, why should we want to build more public infrastructure? Why should we embrace blockchains over corporate intermediaries? Why should we tolerate their inefficiencies and work to make them better? Why should we want the pioneers of this technology here in the United States and not fleeing overseas? A simple reason. Because the corporate intermediaries providing today's critical but privately owned infrastructure are becoming fewer, larger, and more powerful, and their failures are increasingly grave. So
Very least in America, y'all have state law and federal law. Here, we have 5 banks that pretty much run everything. Scotia, BMO, RBC, and TD. 5 banks, it's like an oligopoly. You know what I mean? There's no smaller real banks that anyone really goes to do their banking. It's crazy over here.
roughly half of all Americans, 143 million people, had their Social Security numbers exposed to hackers because of a breach at Equifax. The SWIFT network has relayed hundreds of millions of dollars in fraudulent transactions because of hacked member banks in Bangladesh, Vietnam, Ecuador, and Russia. The FBI suspects now that the largest of these hacks was perpetrated by North Korea. Corrupt, low-level employees at an Indian bank, Punjab National, were able to fraudulently certify SWIFT messages stealing $1.8 billion. It's the largest electronic bank robbery in history. In fact, it's the largest bank robbery in history. In October 2016, an estimated 1.2 million internet-connected devices were hacked and turned into a botnet that for several hours made prominent websites unavailable across Europe and North America, including CNN and Fox News, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. Increasingly, physical machines are being connected to the internet to augment their capabilities. They're wired through servers that are owned and maintained by private and trusted intermediaries, the so-called Internet of Things. Pacemakers from St. Jude's Hospital have been hacked. Baby monitors from TrendNet have been hacked. And Jeeps from Jeep have been hacked to the point where they can be remotely commandeered and driven off the road.
That's my biggest
Now, those
fear,
vulnerabilities are
It's crazy to
inescapable
say.
in systems.
It's actually nuts to think about, but when everything is completely electric and we're hooked up to all these satellite devices and cars, that's literally one of my biggest fears. Like, I have no control over my death in a car. Like, something happens or it goes haywire, and the wheel, they just literally take over the wheel. Like, it sounds so nuts, but yeah, that's definitely one of my fears of dying. It's crazy.
Systems that have single points of failure. It doesn't matter if the point of failure is a corporation or if it's a government. There shouldn't be a single point of failure. Similar choke points existed before the internet. If you wanted to deliver a message, you'd have to go through one of 3 television broadcasters or a handful.
All the dummies were talking about the internet back in the freaking 90s and acting like it was only good for like email and a few other things. Like, you guys look real crazy. I can only imagine in 15 to 20 years from now what y'all are going to be saying about crypto. You're going to be looking silly. And people like us that are here from now, believe it or not, you're still early and you're going to reap the benefits. I promise you, man. I promise you.
Full of newspapers. Private corporations are essential, but no critical infrastructure should rely on one or two. The internet removed single points of failure in communications infrastructure and ushered in a wave of competition among new media corporations building on top of its public rails. Blockchains can similarly disintermediate critical payments and IoT infrastructure. The technology is not yet ready to answer all of those questions today, but it is our best hope. And as with the internet in the 1990s, we need a light-touch, pro-innovation policy to ensure that these innovations flourish in America for the benefit and security of all Americans.
And one more clip just to expand on that. Here is Brian Brooks, the former United States acting comptroller of the currency, explain the difference between Web 1, Web 2, and what cryptocurrency is Web 3.
So the characteristic of Web 1, if people remember their original AOL account, was an ability to look in a curated walled garden at a set of content that was not interactive but was presented to you on AOL. the way that Time magazine used to show you the articles they wanted you to see inside of their magazine. Just you could see it on a screen. The innovation of Web 2 was that suddenly you could not only read content, but you could also write content. This is when the blogosphere became a big thing. People remember this from the late 90s, the early 2000s. The reason for the centralization of the internet, of course, was that all of that activity was being monetized by a very small number of companies. Facebook, as the chairwoman mentions, Google, and 2 or 3 other companies. What makes Web3 different is the ability to own the actual network. Yes. And that's what crypto assets themselves represent, is an ownership stake in an underlying network. So when you hear people talk about, for example, layer 1 tokens, what they mean is this is your reward for providing the ledger maintenance services, the computing power to the network.
So to simplify what he's saying, something like Ethereum is a layer 1 because you can build what we call DApps, decentralized applications, on top of them, right? On top of Ethereum. Similar to how you have iOS operating system as the layer 1, and you can download apps from the App Store on top of it.
That on Web 1 and 2 was done by Google. Right? So now people in my hometown of Pueblo, Colorado can actually own the Ethereum network, but they can't own the internet. That's owned by Google and a few other companies. That's what the project of crypto is all about, is allowing people to directly own the networks that have native assets that are supporting it. And that's the nature of decentralization, where the token holders are the people who control the asset, not Google.
Token holders, for our language here on the Hill, those are digital assets, right? Which are the keys to open up the ledger for you to participate, right? So describe to us how those digital assets fit into this internet revolution, Web3.
So the concept is that you have sort of application layer tokens and you have protocol layer tokens. So if I'm an owner of Bitcoin, let's say that I'm a miner of Bitcoin, somebody who actually creates Bitcoin. The Bitcoin is the reward I receive for doing the work to keep the network operational. And that allows me to own a piece of the Bitcoin blockchain. Or take Ethereum, which is easier to understand. The Ether token represents an ownership stake in the network, but on top of that network are all kinds of apps that get built on the network, much like the apps on your phone depend on the underlying network existing that lets the phone operate. And so people will make judgments about which network is likely to win, and they will invest in the tokens in that network much the same way you might invest in Google stock because you think Google is going to scale access.
Yo, that's why when I made that video, it was like a month ago or so, and I said Cardano's dead, XRP's dead, or whatever. I did it on purpose, obviously, to some type of emotion in the people that watched that video. But when I said that, I didn't necessarily mean the ecosystem was dead. I said the tokens specifically were dead, right? On these ecosystems, a lot of them have vibrant ecosystems and a lot of different dApps built on top of them that do a lot of trading volume and have a lot of holders within them. So the real money is made when you figure out how to self-custody your assets and get onto these blockchains and find these different DeFi products and get into these projects early, like owning these tokens of these new DeFi projects. That's where the real money's made in crypto.
To the original internet. The difference being here, you can vote on what happens in the future of a proof of stake network.
Launchpads, yield farming as well. I talk about that on my channel as well.
For example, you can get rewarded through a proof of work token for maintaining a ledger on something like Bitcoin. But the real message here is that what happens on the decentralized internet is decided by the investors, versus what happens on the main internet is decided by Twitter, Facebook, Google, and a small number of other companies.
If you're interested in learning...
So that is the video. I hope you guys learned a lot. Leave any questions or just comments in general that you have in the description. I'll answer them for you if you are confused at any part, and I'll give you a more detailed explanation. Or let me know what kind of video you want me to make next so that I can also explain to you how that things work. I'm trying to watch these kinds of videos more, react to them, so I can make it a little simpler for the general audience to understand. We're about to hit 2025, and a whole slew of new investors are about to come into the space. So I want to have some videos that are a little more introductory so that they can get a grasp on what this whole space is about and hopefully get up to speed and really ultimately become one of change your life, just to change your life, man. honestly. But anyways, thank you for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.